Welcome to Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairy Tales. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Christensen. Look, you know that between the latest online fads and the crazy media headlines, it's easier than ever to get confused about your health. And you and I just want to feel better and live longer. We want to know what works. And we can't wait for further studies. We need to make decisions today based on the best evidence we've got. Well, that's exactly what this show is here for. So let's get to it.
Hi there, this is Dr. Linda Kashaba from Integrative Health. Would you like some help with your thyroid? We would absolutely love to help you out. And guess what? We can even do remote care. Please call us today at 480-657-0003 to set up your first appointment. If you mention code podcast20, you will get 20% off from your first visit. That phone number again is 480-657-0003, and the code is podcast20. Can't wait to meet you.
Hey, Dr. C here. So what if you've found you've got thyroid disease, but you've heard a lot about the autoimmune paleo diets, but they're just not for you? You know, maybe you're plant-based and it could be for ethical, environmental, religious reasons, health reasons, your pick. But many have been in that spot and said that they just felt like they didn't really have a home and that they felt like they didn't want to make the changes that others said they needed to. So I've thought for quite a while that I've seen examples of many who have gone on diets that were more plant-based and done great for their thyroid disease, and some that have not. But I've also seen that amongst the autoimmune paleo groups. I've seen some do well and some not. And I've thought that both those diets have the potential of being low iodine, but if they inadvertently added in a lot of iodized salt or sea vegetables or the wrong supplements, they may not be low iodine. So I took some time with Elena Wilkins and spoke to her because she's a great resource on one who has done this in a plant-based way and done well with it. She herself was diagnosed with hypothyroidism, infertility, and a pituitary adenoma. She was given thyroid medication and other treatments and just didn't do well from that. But through her approach with diet and lifestyle, she reversed all of it completely. And she's symptom-free and feeling great a decade later and has helped countless others. The really exciting thing is that Elena completely understands the importance of going low iodine. And that's been her big focus with her own diet, more so than any other factor, and that of those she worked with. So I hope you have a blast listening to this. I had a great time talking to her, and I give you Elena Wilkins. Elena, welcome aboard.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, so this is awesome. I found some great articles you had about just how doing healthier steps, which included plant-based options, radically transformed your life. And I've had a lot of my audience who said, hey, I'm vegan, and maybe it's for ethical reasons, maybe it's environmental reasons, or for health reasons. And they've been wondering if they still could do better in terms of their thyroid or their health because of that. They've seen a lot of messages saying to the contrary. So I wanted to bring you on and share your experience and let people hear your story a bit.
I'm very grateful because for me, my story began as my personal story. So many, many years ago, I was the kind of person that sought to get well. I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism, infertility, and a pituitary tumor. And the only thing my doctors told me, and I've seen quite a few of them, was it's permanent. Don't ever count on that being reversed. You just take medication and you're going to have your life like this for the rest of your life. And so for me, that was not okay. And that's how I started my search. So I can see how people do get to a point that eventually the answer of this is how it's supposed to be for the rest of your life is just not good enough anymore.
For sure. So if you wouldn't mind going back and let's go a little deeper. So infertility, I could see how that could show up, but were there symptoms you were seeking out? Was it screening tests, or how did this all come into place?
Yeah. So for me, my husband and I got married, and right before we got married, he went through 3 brain surgeries. So I was a primary caregiver, and then there was a lot of stress involved, barely sleeping, and eating. I used to eat well, but then it was just whatever came my way. So what happened through process is my body just broke down. I stopped menstruating. I gained weight. As we got married, I already put on probably 20 pounds in spite of working out, which was maddening. So my doctor, and that was my OBGYN, basically told me, if you want to address your amenorrhea, just get on birth control. I didn't really want
Hmm.
to. I had my reservations, but I was not smart enough to do any research at that time, so I didn't. So chemically, it was regulated, but with birth control for me personally came also weight gain, loss of libido. And since it did not really address the underlying cause of what really caused my issues, the system just kept breaking down. It was more symptoms. Eventually, hair was falling out, eyebrows thinning out, my joints began to hurt, and I'm barely entering into my 30s at that time.
Oh,
And
wow.
5 years in depression, and I can tell you probably I was not depressed. First depression was because I tried everything, nothing was working, but nevertheless, I ended up there. So it was really a process of, it took me 5 years to get diagnosis. My symptoms were piling on. Joints were really bad at one point. My husband used to pull me out of bed because everything hurt so badly. And yet my doctors kept telling me everything was either okay or I was borderline. And there's no explanation to borderline, right? Yeah.
In terms of your thyroid function, I'm assuming?
Yeah, they were borderline hypothyroid, and I had CT scans done, the ultrasound scan done on thyroid, and took the test. So it takes me 5 years of going to each doctor. My joints are hurting. This is going on, and everybody's trying to give me either a pill or a supplement. And mind you, I tried most of those things, and nothing was resolved. So eventually, I found a guy.
Any of the things you tried that were memorable or particular?
Oh, well, not at that point. So at that point, I finally find a doctor that was able to diagnose me. And this is when he told me basically it's irreversible. Here's two prescriptions. So I did try a medication for thyroid, but then I was too scared because there were side effects that were more severe than my own symptoms. But the things that I had ended up trying in the years to come were things like chiropractic care, acupuncture. I work with a chemist and supplements. I tried a lot of supplements. I've seen osteopaths, medical doctors, naturopaths, basically you name it. I have tried it all, anything from tinctures to magic potions and pills. The only thing I declined was to have a surgery, but outside of that, I can tell you that it was just a snowball effect of you try one thing, it doesn't work, you try diets, they don't work. And eventually I got to a point that I decided it has to be easier than that, and that's when I started researching to making my own changes that eventually saved my life.
So the ongoing diagnosis, you mentioned there was the hypothyroidism, and eventually it was enough to where at least one of the doctors suggested thyroid replacement for you. And the infertility diagnosis was there as well. And those things can go together. But they had discovered pituitary disease at this stage, or did that show up later? Or?
Yeah, they told me. So I was pre-diagnosed basically. My pituitary was not scanned at that time yet, but my prolactin was elevated.
Hmm.
So the doctor made a conclusion that I have a prolactinoma. And he said that my levels were elevated just slightly, so nobody would want to operate on me. For the next few years, as I was searching for an answer, I did end up having an MRI done.
Okay, they did finally do a scan.
Yeah, and they basically told me it looks abnormal, but they could not find a specifically an adenoma on it. But they also told me it could be so small that's not yet detectable.
I'm not sure
And
if they mentioned this, but this is funny. But the hypothalamus tells the pituitary to make thyroid stimulating hormone, and
mhm,
the pathway that does that is called thyrotropin releasing hormone. And in the hypothalamus signal to the pituitary, there's a lot of crosstalk between it and the small cells that secrete prolactin. So many people, when they have a high signal from the hypothalamus asking for more thyroid, it also activates pituitary to make some prolactin. And in
mhm.
some cases, it can make a doctor assume that there's a adenoma when there's really not. So it could have been the case.
It could have been, and I, at that point when they told me basically your pituitary looks abnormal, I just took them at their word that that was the diagnosis. But I did have the
Yeah,
symptoms that came with it. So, pra-
sure.
lactation was one of them, but I also used to have headaches right in that area as well, and it was something abnormal to me because before all of this happened, I was a very healthy person. So no pains or aches, and all of a sudden everything just crashed all at once.
So do you see a particular turning point in the story? Like, was there some point where it sounded like you decided to make some big changes and some things first finally started to become effective, or how did that play out?
Yeah, so for me, I ended up marrying a guy who was, oh God, he had daily chest pains after any meal, any stress. And I got to a point that I got scared. So he got tested and he had high cholesterol. So we went to see doctors for him. And he also heard things like, it is hereditary, there's nothing you can do. And I went into a year-long research. As I was doing research, I came across the book by Dr. Colin Campbell, The China Study. And it really,
Hmm.
for me, I'm a researcher. That's my background. I studied engineering and I studied physics. So for me, I speak in graphs and bullet points. So the evidence that I saw in his book, and then I started looking in outside sources besides his as well, it was convincing enough for me to say, we at least need to give it a try. So when we did, my husband was medication free within 3 months. His cholesterol leveled up from 220 to 149 within just a few months. So everything looked beautiful. So by the time it came to me, I was still medicated at that time. But when I finally gave up and I said it's not working, I just decided if it's working for him, I need to go full force on it myself. So I did. So hypothyroidism,
Super quick question. Did he have high triglycerides as well, or mostly the high cholesterol, LDL?
yeah, he all of the above.
Okay.
And he also had basically chronic chest pain coming with that, so angina. And the doctor could not believe that it would ever be possible to reverse it. So, however, within a few months, his cholesterol dropped to 149, and then his triglycerides normalized, his HDL, LDL were normal, and all of the chest pains went away too. And he lost weight in the process.
And I'm sure in your work you came across things like Ornish and Esselstyn, and those
Mhm.
those things can happen. People can often reverse varying levels of cardiac disease.
Yeah, and it's very uninvasive. So what I loved about that was the fact that yes, it did take me a little while to figure out how to cook in a different way, and it seems like the first few months, but after that, when the shock wore off, we just fell into it, and it became the only way we know how to do life now. So for me, when I finally got to a point, I was like, okay, medication is not working. This is not working. We need to try something. I transitioned off of medication. And then, so the diet alone allowed me to reverse hypothyroidism.
Can you give me a thorough detail of what your diet, what it consists of after when you made that change?
Absolutely. So we were not perfect in the beginning. Not that I do much better now than I did before, but even with that, with amazing outcomes. So generally speaking, the diet was whole foods, plant-based, low fat. I never called it vegan because I do consume honey every now and then, so that would make me non-vegan. But outside of that, it was pretty much a vegan diet. Now, when I work with somebody now, some of my clients will have a little bit of meat in their intake too. But for me, I eliminated all of the dairy, all of the meat products. So no fish, no red, no white meat, none of that. And that was more for his sake to start with. And eventually for me, I fell into the thought process of if nothing has to die to keep me alive, I just might as well, not do it. And that was great for me.
Particular types of salt that you would use, or
Yeah, so we generally salt, sea salt, Himalayan salt. I prefer those. They're rich in minerals. I do not do table or iodized salt because increase in iodine intake in the developed countries always were linked to increase in thyroid issues. So for us, since we live in a very developed country and our produce comes from all over the world, very slim chances that we would be low in iodine because the soil is so diverse that it was raised, by, yeah, grown in.
I could almost cry because I'm so happy to hear someone else who's who's figured that out.
Well, there's so much evidence and science, and we can go into that now too. But in China, there were a couple of provinces where they did not have iodized table salt. And when it was introduced in their intake within a few months, all of a sudden there was increase in incidences, not of only hypothyroidism, but also Graves' disease and Hashimoto's.
Yep. One of the dramatic recent examples we have is Denmark. They were one of the most recent larger industrial nations to iodinize their salt. And this is a wild thing. So you can have, with iodine, there's like 3 ways it can be off. You can have too much, or you can have too little, or you can just change it and even change it in a way that you wouldn't think would be too much. And that was what Denmark did. They fortified, and they didn't go above what a rational target should have been. But for 15 years running, they have increasing rates of all types of thyroid disease and thyroid surgeries and everything ever since. So it's a
Yeah.
big pattern.
Yeah, there is a pattern. It's hard to deny. And I do so if I have worked now with clients from 28 different countries. So when I get somebody from Central Asia, the soil there seems to be more depleted in iodine. There, people there benefit a little bit. But again, it doesn't have to be such horrible dosages that would make somebody sick. When I had thyroid issues, one of the naturopaths I seen, he was his methodology was that if he puts a little bit of iodine on your skin, and if you don't retain it for long so it absorbs fast. You were deficient in his opinion, so he would put you on iodine pills. What that does actually makes people more sick. So me, I did it for a month and then I was smart enough to stop. And then I went to another naturopath who said, oh my God, that is too crazy. It will do the opposite for you.
Do you want to hear the funny thing about that skin test?
Uh-huh.
So you're a researcher. So that was studied, and they did a very large study in which they had three different types of participants. One group of participants had normal thyroid function. One group had rather late stage hypothyroidism, and the third group was actually dead. So they had cadaver skin.
Mm-hmm.
And all these groups where they did the iodine painted on, like you described, and then they watched to see how much absorbed and whether it was different. There's a pattern between good thyroid function, bad thyroid function, or being dead. And about 80% of iodine you paint on your skin absorbs into the air, but the rest, some of it does absorb into the system. But whether you're alive or dead or good thyroid or bad thyroid, there's no pattern on how much you absorb. And this study was done in 1932. They figured that out a long time ago.
Yeah, and it's madness. Well, this is where I go. I think it's totally crazy that we fall into things that they sound good and they will sell books and they'll create this, phenomena in people. But I think that the simpler the lifestyle is, the better it is. And I had a client a few years ago. She came to me and she was hypothyroid. So her doctor puts her on iodine tablets and she goes into full-blown Hashimoto's.
Oh, sure.
And so it's really something that sounds good. It really is not necessarily good for us. And a deeper research needs to be done on a lot of things. But for me, when there's lack of research, I default to common sense. Let's look at humanity historically. Let's look at what common sense would tell us. And we see that people, usually populations that live right on the ocean and they have a lot of seafoods or sea vegetables, they're the ones with elevated iodine levels that can cause things that we're trying to avoid here.
I was speaking at a medical conference this last weekend, and a gentleman, I was pretty much saying what you were saying right now, and a gentleman said, well, how come they have low rates of thyroid disease in Japan? And my comeback was, how can we call it Hashimoto's disease and not O'Malley's disease or not Gomez's disease? I said, no, they have the highest rates of thyroid disease in Japan, and that's why Dr. Hashimoto was working hard to figure it out.
Yeah, it's madness, and I think there's so much scare tactics around this because there was no proper study done on a population that would be more likely to succeed. So, for example, there's a lot of conversation about cruciferous vegetables and nightshades and how bad they are for you. But when you look at the studies that were constructed, we can take them apart piece by piece and basically say it's common nonsense.
Yeah,
really,
completely.
When you take extracts and you shove it down somebody's throat, night and day, of course there will be adverse reaction. But so I had reversed my hypothyroidism, and now thousands of women later know hypothyroidism issues. And I gorge on cruciferous vegetables. They're protective against cancer and they're protective against heart issues. And the worst case scenario is steam them and all of that becomes normal. But I think there are too many fears placed out there to make things complicated. And when we make them more complicated, people are less likely to do things that are healthy for them.
And this is a bizarre thing I've observed, but the iodine is so central to it. It's going to be the focus of my next book. And there are those who have advocated autoimmune paleo diets. And in a roundabout way, some who do that may end up getting lower in iodine by cutting out dairy and processed bread. And many will cut out iodized salt. And so to the extent to which they do that, it may often help. But there's a lot of other ways you can get lower in iodine and have similar benefits.
Absolutely. Well, I couldn't agree more. There was a study done that showed actually that we would assume that plant-based or vegan diets, they'd be low in iodine, therefore we would be more deficient, and that means we should have higher incidences of hypothyroidism. The studies actually revealed that it becomes protective for the thyroid gland to be more plant-based. So I do agree, people who go paleo and keto, and I see a lot of this, initially they can have a great outcome and boost in energy and weight loss. My only concern with that, it is again not historically sustainable, that we see in long-term symptoms and side effects become detrimental to a lot of people in many ways.
Yeah. So what was the time frame between your current dietary regime and then some real clear changes in your thyroid function? Like what was the time gap that you noticed there?
Yeah. So for me, mind you, that it was not perfect the way I would do it now, but within about 6 to 8 months, my thyroid levels improved. So I went from over 6, my TSH was over 6 to about 2.4 something. And then the next year that I got tested, it was a 1.4. So it was,
That's awesome.
It was rather quick. And most of the women I work with now, for them, the turnaround we see sometimes as fast as 4 to 8 weeks.
We'll be right back after word from Integrative Health.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairy Tales. This is Dr. Raquel Espinal at Integrative Healthcare. You know, so often we hear from our new patients that their primary care physician has told them that their thyroid and hormone levels are fine and they should not worry. Yet the patients still have symptoms of severe fatigue, thinning hair, and weight issues. Unfortunately, this is too common with thyroid care. The good news is we can help and there is hope. The doctors at Integrative Health, including myself, specialize in naturally treating your thyroid, your hormone, and adrenal issues. We would love to get you started on the path to ideal health. From the comfort of your own home, you can get treatment with one of the doctors at Integrative Health via telemedicine. Go to integrativehealthcare.com to become a new patient today. Use the code podcast20 for 20% off your new patient visit. Again, that is integrativehealthcare.com and use the code podcast20, all one word. Get back to the road to thriving. We look forward to seeing you.
And now, back for more medical myths, legends, and fairy tales. There was a big study that I've referenced a few times, well, a couple of them that have been done on Hashimoto's and subclinical hypothyroidism, and then also on non-Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. And all three of those studies showed that with targeted iodine reduction, people would see about a 3 to 6 month time frame for TSH scores to normalize in the vast majority. And some of the studies would also look at some markers of, there's no perfect test for iodine, but there's some that can give you a clue as to whether or not someone's doing a good job reducing it. And so the studies that would categorize people based on how compliant they were would show that those who didn't respond as well were pretty much the ones that weren't being compliant.
Yeah, I agree. When I talk to potential clients, we always disclose our success rate with our clients as well, so they know what to expect. But they always ask, so what would it take for somebody to not be successful with this way of living? And it's always non-compliance. It is without a fault. I think in the last few years, I might have had 1 or 2 people who might have had some genetic markers that prevented full success. But 90% of the time, if not higher, when somebody is not succeeding with this lifestyle, is when they're non-compliant.
And do you want to tell us, you put together a program that you do with people, and it's more than diet. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that, like what it all entails?
Yeah, I would love to, if that is okay with you.
Sure.
Yeah, so I reversed my hypothyroidism within about just a few months, and the weight came off. I lost a total of 50 pounds, and that was great. But then my hair started to grow back and eyebrows and so on. But then I hit a plateau. I still could not pregnant. I was still not ovulating. And I spent the next few years searching that. And I was really in my 30s now, really wanted to get pregnant. And that became that's when I got depressed. When you do everything that is right and you still don't get outcomes, emotionally you take a beating. But what I started to look at, that diet alone sometimes can resolve a lot of health issues, but sometimes it's not enough. Or on the longer I practice, then what I developed, what I found is that diet can resolve it and it takes longer, or we can take a multi-level approach and we can expedite the process. Because really, if you look at the body, it's not just a machine, but it's a compilation of your essence, the part of you, the things, feels. And that's why right now, I think even in medical science, we see a lot of conversation about stress management. So what I started to notice is people who have certain stress levels or past trauma or deficiencies, things like that, they are more likely to get sick even faster than others. And they get only better when we address those things. So layer by layer, here's what I discovered. First is the diet. Next, we're looking at deficiencies that cannot be addressed through dietary sources only. So for some people, and this is not particular to vegans, because most of my clients come to me, they are not vegan, so over 90%, but I always see low B12 levels in most people because their digestion is really messed up, and that's where that would happen. Then I also see low vitamin D, but vitamin D would never do supplementation. It's always, the biggest solution is get out in the sun, absorb it, process it, we're good that way. And then another thing that I always notice in people is that most of them have digestive disorders where they're mild or severe. So it doesn't have to be irritable bowel disease. It can be things that you are having a lot of allergies or you're having a lot of sensitivities. And that really signals that there's a horrible situation in your gut. So by addressing gut issues, and that will be through diet and some probiotics that are particularly chosen for a particular time in your life that can increase that. When that is done, the next step is we start looking at people's life, because I don't know if you ever heard of, especially Dr. Joe Dispenza, Bruce
Hmm.
Lipton, Greg Braden, and others in this field, but they really look at the body-mind connection, how that plays role in health as well. And I've looked at a lot of research, and we see that we all have heard of the effect that is called placebo, right? When your thoughts can make even water, if you believe this medicine to make you whole, or some people believe it's holy water, then boom, the healing happens. But there's
Sure.
also an effect that is known as nocebo, and not many people talk about that. And that is when your thoughts can make you sick. So
Yeah.
notably, Joe Dispenza, he has a lot of those kind of things collected in his books that I've read, his training program. But I started to observe this with our clients. When they expect the worst is almost inevitably happening. When they expect that something's going to go wrong, it goes wrong. And I'm not going to get into the whole spiritual part of it, but this is more on just factual, mental, physical plane. But we have seen when people have experienced either traumatic past, and it can be sexual trauma, physical trauma, emotional trauma, or there was a lot of stress like it was in my life. What that does is multi-level, but on one hand, it depletes the minerals really fast. Because when your body is in fight, flight, or freeze, it suspends a lot of those bodily function. So if you're
Sure.
coming here and you have Hashimoto's, and we change your diet and you're still not 100% better, we're looking if your body is not stuck in that constant fight or flight. Because if it is, who cares about your thyroid? Your body is just trying to keep your heart beating, right? Kind of like running away from the lion. You don't think about whether your foot is going to hurt, or your thyroid is not functioning. You are just keeping yourself alive. Um, so that became a really huge piece in working with people for me, because most of Americans, especially, and I'm sure that you observe this in your practice, we are stuck in constant fight or flight mode. Would you agree
For
that that
sure.
happens in your practice, and you see a lot of people like that?
Honestly, the HPA axis, I think, is a big part of all facets of health. That was the focus of my prior book almost exclusively. So yeah, I think that's huge.
Yeah. So, and for us, we look at, a lot of people go to talk therapy, and I know it works for some people, so I have nothing negative to say about that. But for most people, it does not. So we use tools like trauma release exercise, meditation, visualization, just a lot of different tools, and they'll be more person specific because no two people are alike. So that's one of the things. Then the next thing that we always deal with is relationships. And this is a big one, right? We are human. We're the kind of animal that will always be surrounded by others, but it's the way we relate to others can also determine the levels of stress that will affect us in our health. So we take an approach that relationships need to be resolved in one way or another so they're functional. I had women who come in and their spouses are really, really supportive of them. And these are the women who 4 or 5 weeks later, they're almost 100% better. You go, oh my God, how is that even possible? And then I see some women who are stuck in really poor relationships when no matter what they do, you just basically cannot wish the stress away. You need to deal with it. And they either plateau or they get stuck or they revert back to not feeling well.
So they have a tougher go of it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's really, I worked with a client last year. She suffered with chronic fatigue for 5 years, so barely moving, barely getting off the couch, making ends meet. And she was in a relationship that was not great for her health. So we got her to a point, she was still married to the guy. We got her to a point that she did much better. She started to work out, she started running again. She felt like a person again, but eventually that relationship took a toll on her. And then for her, the biggest breaking point was to decide, what do you do from that point? Do you either live with it and you put up with it for the rest of your life, or do you just have some hard conversations, make hard decisions? And what we see is oftentimes when women find their voice in relationships, that's when even their thyroid function, and I don't know if there's scientific specific connection there, that if you don't speak your truth, your thyroid is going to not function well. But I see it in real life where we really notice that the more we stuff our emotions down, the more we do not express how we feel. It really,
Sure.
thyroid is only one of the things that gets to a point that it doesn't function well, but other hormones are also affected in the process.
Well, and some people have different weak fuses from others. So when the stress load's high enough, it may not manifest the same way. But for many, that's for sure how it happens.
Yeah, so I do notice a lot of times, and one of the things that we notice people with autoimmune conditions, when you deal with the obvious things like diet or too much iodine, if that does not resolve, we often look at them if there was any trauma in their past, because more often than not, the fact that they were attacked either physically or emotionally, it translates to how their body eventually treats them as well. So when I had a client 2 years ago, she came to me, all of the symptoms of thyroid issues, and she was diagnosed with that PCOS. And 4 weeks in, we made very marginal progress. So she addressed the diet and she stuck with it 100%. But we're only 20% in, and my clients usually measure their progress every single week, so we know exactly how much better they get. And then we had a conversation, and there were some things that she held back in the beginning that she disclosed later, that she was sexually abused as a child. In her whole life, she was living with that pain. I'm not good enough. This is never going to happen for me, is having that view. And like I said, I'm not a therapist, so I gave her some tools that she can use in the comfort of her own home to deal with it. The most amazing things happened within 4 weeks of her implementing that and then continuing with addressing deficiencies in her diet. She was 80% better. Within 6 months, she was 100% better.
That's incredible. I looked at your page too, and I saw that you've had many with Hashimoto's, but also many with Graves. You want to mention Graves briefly, or?
Yeah. So the Graves is really, that's another extreme of the autoimmune disease. And I think that you just mentioned that a little bit earlier, is that every person's body will respond differently to the same stress. So you and I might go through the same diet, same stress, but I'll process things differently than you would, and you're going to end up with a different condition than I would. So the women who come to me with Graves' disease, their hormone, the thyroid stimulating hormone is just too, on the number scale, it's too low, but it's really too high. So they're overstimulating their thyroid, and what it does, it also eats away the thyroid gland, like it would with Hashimoto's. Most of them are placed on a drug that is called methimazole.
Methimazole is most common right now.
Yeah, most common. And usually the maximum they can be on it is about 6 to 8 years. And after that, doctors tell them we either need to do radioactive treatment to burn your thyroid out or just cut it out. And so what happens again, the underlying cause is never resolved, but the symptoms are treated to a point. So a year and a half, I had a client, she was in the last year of possibly ever being on methimazole, because now it was affecting the rest of her body. And they had pre-scheduled her possible surgery, and that's how she found me. One of the first things that we resolved was her diet. And amazingly, it never stops to absolutely amaze me. The same approach, the same dietary patterns that we use to help people with hypo and Hashimoto's are the same dietary patterns that help people with hyperthyroidism and Graves' disease. Mm-hmm. So that was addressed. Now with methimazole, it was very strong medication. It took her in all about 9 months. And all of my clients, if they're ever on medication, they always have to work with a doctor when the reduction happens. But her doctor weaned her off within 9 months of the highest dosage of methimazole that was available to her. And she went into complete remission. And as of now, we're a year and a half into it, and she's still symptom-free.
That's wonderful. There's a loop that goes on, which is true for both Hashimoto's and Graves, but is even more pronounced with Graves, in which the abnormal amount of thyroid hormone, the excessive amount, that by itself drives the autoimmune process, which causes the body to release the extra hormone. So once someone normalizes to a good enough degree, then there's a real good chance of that just resetting itself and healing.
Yeah, and I love that meeting doctors like you, Dr. Allen, is amazing, because most doctors out there, and this is what I hear daily, and I speak to at least 5 women a day. What I hear is doctors tell them what they learned in school. It is irreversible. It is permanent. The only way out is either a medication, surgery, or radiation. And what saddens me is that we don't look at everything that happens in our life. I think that thyroid cancer is now on the rise. It's one of the fastest growing cancers, and it's predicted to be the 3rd leading cancer in America in the next couple of years. And we start looking at our lifestyle patterns. We are more stressed. We're eating more junk. We're consuming more iodine because of it, because it's usually in all processed foods. And then we're also radiated more than anybody else. So the x-rays, the CAT scans, the MRIs, and everything else that comes with it Most people, for example, when they go to their dentist, they do not ask for a collar to cover their thyroid gland. They don't even know that exists. But when there are x-raying your teeth, your thyroid gets a hit too. And there's a limit of what can happen. But it's small things like this, they're adding up, and we're becoming sicker nation. If it was, I think, estimated about 16 million of people in America had thyroid issues just a few years ago, I think we're at about close to 20 or 30 million these days.
One other variable that's relevant, I found a assay in which some researchers listed out the top, I think it was 117 multivitamins, some were prescriptions, some were not, and they randomly selected 60 of them and just purchased them over the counter, brought them back to laboratories and assayed the iodine content. And they all had some listed, but not one single supplement on assay had the listed amount of iodine. They were all discrepant. And in some cases, it was 2 or 3 or 4-fold above the recommended amounts. It were the listed amounts. So a big variable too for people is that if they're taking multis, which they pretty much all have iodine, they may be getting, even the labeled amounts may be too much, but in many cases, the amount that's actually there is not at all what's labeled.
Yeah, I agree. I'm pretty much, in my personal life, I'm anti-supplement for the most part. So the only supplement I personally take is a daily B12. And sometimes when I skip, I don't stress over that either. But outside of that, it has to be clean diet, clean water, getting out in the sun, being active, and reducing stress. If you look at the supplement market, it is highly unregulated. So I'm not a huge fan of medication. I do believe we need it in acute situations, but in chronic conditions, it's not useful for the most part. When we look at the supplement market, it's not regulated like medications are regulated. So what we're ending up with right now, I can put some water in a little flask and say, this is a supplement that will help you feel better, and then I can sell it. That's how unregulated it is. On the other hand, I can put whatever I want into it and sell it. It can be mislabeled. Nobody will check on it. And I think that there is the danger. When I was finally conceived and I was pregnant with my daughter, I started to look and see if I really wanted to take a multivitamin, because my diet was pretty much the all kind of multivitamin you can imagine. I went to a local Whole Foods and I picked out a few bottles, and I called every single company to just ask them a few simple questions, such as, where do you source your ingredients from? Which ones of them are natural? Which ones of them are synthetic? And can you guarantee the production? And over 80% of them did not know. So most of them did not get back to me, but the ones that got back to me, they had no clue where the ingredients were sourced from, how they were processed. And a lot of them also did not know whether it was synthetic or not. And those who did know about that, what we found is most of those ingredients in multivitamins are synthetic, which are not great for the body. So there's this multi-level, it's scary what happens. One of my clients right now, she's a nurse, and she's been suffering for the last 6 years so much she cannot even go and work out at the gym. There's no energy, barely moving. And when we were talking to her as she was starting, all of the symptoms that she described to me just were screaming that there was probably MTHFR mutation. And since she was a nurse, it was that much easier for her to get tested. I told her, go talk to your doctor, ask for the specific test. Well, lo and behold, she just got them back, and we found out that she has 2 genes that mutated. And with that specific mutation, just taking things like folic acid can make you supremely sick, which she was. Anytime she was taking anything with folic acid in it, she felt like she was dying. But the fact that we are not aware of things like this, and doctors don't know yet I think in the next few years, it will become a standard for doctors to test for it, but hers did not know. And this is a nurse who's been in the industry for a couple of decades. You think that we would know things like that, but we don't, and what we don't know is hurting us. So those supplements that were they were supposed to help her, they were actually harming her in the long run.
Yeah. And the overlap between thyroid disease and MTHFR abnormalities are just shy of 100%. It's probably, I've done some math on that before, and it really is like 99.9 some odd percent. It's just about a perfect overlap.
Yeah, and with her, so the specific person, we changed the diet. I told her, talk to your doctor. She was on several medications that also were interfering with this genetic mutation. But in the last 10 days, she was finally able to have enough energy to get up, work a full day, go work out at the gym for the first time in 6 years, and still show up and be there for her family. And it's all just from really knowing what's going on with you, how are you genetically made up, and then really knowing the best food to eat for that kind of condition, and which is, like I said, for most of our clients, it's really the same approach. But the small alterations that needs to be made is around genetic mutations, around whether it's autoimmune condition or not. But I think that this is where we're missing. There's reaction in people to certain medications because of these genetic mutations too.
So if I can ask, you had quite a transformation that you went through, and how long ago was that? You've been on this path for some time now, it sounds like.
Yes, so I finally was, when I was finally diagnosed was 2007. So that makes it just 12 years ago, and I immediately radically changed everything. So for almost 12 years now, I have been symptom-free, lost the weight. I had the baby. I used to do different things for a living, but this kind of found me. I started to blog about my process, just how this happened, because people that I knew kept asking, like, what do you eat? Why do you do this? So I started just blogging about it. There was one spot. Before I knew it, people from all over the world were asking about, how do I do this too? So the calling found me. So I went back to school, got education on this. But for me, it's a decade now. And I can tell you that there have been no regrets for me to go this radical, because I believe that there's nothing more radical than having to have a surgery or be on medication that causes side effects. So for me, this was a really fair trade-off in my lifestyle, and just daily check-in with my diet, the thoughts, staying hydrated, simple things in life that all of us do. That was really a fair trade-off for what I get to do now. And that is no depression for the last decade, and living in the best body at 43 compared to the body when I was 26 years of age.
That is so awesome. And with nightshades, with plants that have lectins, so not avoiding these types of things, you've still done fine.
Embracing, I eat. So I grew up in a country, I grew up overseas. I'm not American born, as you can probably hear it. So in my country, we did not use a lot of soy products. So nothing like you do in America, but we use soybeans. So now it's a part of it. I know that soy is vilified largely, and unfortunately so, because there's so much evidence that it's protecting against cancer. But including products that are made of whole soy, not extracts. We do cruciferous vegetables, and we do nightshades, and I do smoothies, and I eat a lot of greens. And my life is really what I want it to be. And I eat very wide variety of foods, because when I was going through this change, I needed to figure out how to cook. So my diet includes cuisines of different origins. I can have Russian one day, Ukrainian another day, some Italian food, Thai food. It's very rich. It's very freeing also, because I never have to think about, oh my God, what do I eat tomorrow? And my food is really fast. If I ever get hungry, all I have to do is grab some fresh grapes or apples or cucumbers, and that's pretty much it. That can be my snack. And my meals are really quick too. And I spend a couple of times a week, I get in the kitchen, I make enough for the whole week, and then I get to live.
What are some things you'll batch cook typically? How do you do that?
So batch cooking, and I recommend it for anybody who wants to have a life, unless they're a chef and they love doing this, is I usually will make 2 different kind of soups for the week. So there could be vegetable soup. I have a delicious chili recipe. I will make that. I can have some in the fridge. I'll freeze some, and then I'll just pull it out and defrost them. For grains, I like to pre-cook either quinoa or brown rice. And I always have at least a couple of different beans. So maybe it will be navy beans and kidney beans. I'll pre-cook them and then freeze some, keep some. And then I will chop a whole bunch of vegetables. So for example, if I felt like solid food, I'll pull out brown rice, put some beans into it, put vegetables in it, and put some sauce over it. And that's my meal. I can take the same thing, put it in a veggie wrap, and all of a sudden I have a wrap. Or if I really wanted a soup with the same ingredients, I just pour some hot water over it, add spices, and I have a soup. So it really makes this life really, really easy and stress-free. And in a pinch, if I didn't want to just grab an apple or grapes, we in my family will love green smoothies. So we'll whip that up and we'll just drink it on the go too.
That's really cool. So, wow, this has been inspirational. Hearing your story, hearing about your experience with others, other points you'd like to share with people out there about what you've seen and what you've learned.
Yes, and thank you for that invitation, because for me, I am my client's advocate. I am my advocate. Most people still don't know how to advocate for themselves. And I do believe that one day, Dr. Allen, the world will be filled with doctors like you who are open to use all the alternative, and I don't know why we even call them alternative, but the lifestyle and dietary modifications, they're not really alternative. They are exactly the main, they are the crux of everything. And as they do, I think we are not going to have to advocate for ourselves as much, but we still should. But every person out there, here's what I learned for myself. If you don't love the answer that you hear, and your body has not yet been completely destroyed and mutilated through surgeries, get a second opinion and a third opinion and a fourth opinion if you need to. At the end of the day, don't think that your labs have the complete answer for your future. It's diagnostic, not a prognostic of what can happen in the future. So finding a specialist in the field that you can click with because you want to be in love with the person who is saving your life, and B, can do it for you in the most natural way is the way to go. So in acute situations, absolutely, if you need medication to save your life, take it, but find a kind of doctor or where there's a nutritionist, a health coach, or somebody else who will work alongside with you and make it their goal to see you where you want to be seen at 100% health. And don't come up with excuses. It's genetic, it's this or that or the other, because even with that, we have science now that only about 2 to about 3% of people can say it is genetically, that genetics are responsible for their health issues. For the rest of us, even with genetic mutations, we can still change the diet, we can change the mindset, we can sleep better, we can stress less, and we can do better. So my big advice would be simplify your life as much as you can, and don't overcomplicate the thinking process. You're going to go on a freak out when you're first diagnosed. That is normal. Allow yourself to sometimes feel like you want to give up and get that out of your system, and then don't give up until the point where you will get everything that you want. So for me, I live by one principle only. It's always a matter of when, never a matter of if. It will always happen. So I work with women who had hysterectomies or thyroidectomies, and they still can do better. So given we are not miracle workers, we cannot put a body part back in, but your body can still be able to make up for the deficiency. So if I can leave your audience with anything, it would be just perk up, know that there is an answer probably to your problem, and then work with a person who believes in that as much as you do. Because I believe that our healthcare practitioners need to be invested in our well-being. Outside of that, we're just becoming a permanent patient who will be on medication, who will get sicker, and the side effects, for example, from levothyroxine, I think there's over 50 possible side effects that come with it. So just counting everything in and never giving up. That is the biggest thing. And then realize that there's no magic potion. The magic at the end of the day, and this is what I teach everybody who I work with, is the magic will lie in your hands. It's never going to be the specialist or the practitioner or the doctor or anybody else. They can only give you the tools, but the person who will need to make that miracle happen is you. And that means you need to work on yourself, on your mindset, and be open, wide open to possibilities.
That was awesome stuff. So thank you so much for your time. And we're going to get some links in our show notes. If you want to connect more with Elena, you can find her at 360impacthealth.com. We'll have that there. And wonderful stuff. Appreciate it, Elena.
Well, I appreciate being here and just sharing hope with those who seem like we have no hope, because I've been there, I've done that. I've spent about 8 years searching for truth, and I spent at least $15,000 to $20,000 finding none. And then realizing it can be really very easy and simple. And I'm so appreciative that there are doctors like you who have that MD after their name, and they can be trusted to actually guide people to health and wellness.
All right, Dr. C here with you, and I'll be back with you again real soon. Meantime, take great care of yourselves. Hey, Dr. Christensen here. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode. Is there a topic you'd like me to cover? I'd love to hear from you. Just go to Dr. Alan Christensen on Facebook or Instagram, write your question, and use the hashtag #MedicalMyths. Did you find this show helpful? If so, please take a minute and leave us a rating on iTunes so that others can know. Thanks much. I'll be back with you real soon. Bye-bye.